So now let's talk about the quadratic formula and our x-intercepts. Now, if you think about the classic parabola shape, what is the maximum number of x-intercepts that a parabola can have? Meaning, if I have my parabola shape, my U shape, what is the most number of times that U shape can cross the x-axis, x-intercepts? Well, you're probably thinking the most number of times you can cross is 2. If I cross here and here, that gives me 2 x-intercepts. So then I would ask you, is there a possibility, a parabola we can draw that would have 0 x-intercepts, meaning it doesn't ever cross the x-axis? Well, yeah, if you have a parabola that is above the x-axis pointing up or below the x-axis pointing down. Both of those kinds of parabolas will never touch the x-axis. They have 0 x-intercepts. And then the last one I would ask you about, what about a parabola that has 1 x-intercept? It only crosses the x-axis once. Well, that happens if your parabola comes and touches the x-axis. So if it just barely touches the x-axis and then bounces right off of it, that is only 1 x-intercept. Now, the reason we're talking about all of this is this part of your quadratic formula, the part that's under the square root. We call this the discriminant. Now, this discriminant will actually tell you how many x-intercepts there are. Let me give you an example. This discriminant is a square root. So what if I simplify this stuff on the inside and I get the square root of a negative number? Can I do the square root of a negative number? Well, no, that's imaginary. That doesn't exist. So if I simplify this and I get the square root of a negative, am I going to have any x-intercepts? No. So this 0 x-intercepts is when your discriminant is negative, because then your x-intercepts are imaginary. They're complex numbers. So if you plug that in and get a negative, no x-intercepts. Your parabola will never cross the x-axis. So then what do you think the discriminant would be to have 2 x-intercepts? Well, if this one is square root of a negative gives me no x-intercepts, then square root of a positive will give me 2. And it works out that way because if I do the square root and I simplify this and that's a positive number, now I have my plus or minus. The plus is one of your x-intercepts. The minus is the other x-intercept. So that gives you 2 x-intercepts. So then what would it be to have 1 x-intercept? Well, square root of a negative is none. Square root of a positive is 2. So square root of 0 will give you 1 x-intercept. Because if this whole thing simplifies to a 0, then we have square root of 0, which is 0, and the plus or minus totally goes away because all of that is 0. And now you only have 1 answer, or 1 x-intercept. So that is a really fast way for you to visualize what your parabola is going to look like by doing this discriminant here and seeing how many times it's going to cross the x-axis. Now, one last thing we should talk about before we actually start to practice with all this stuff. If I have standard form or vertex form, do you remember how to tell in these equations if my parabola faces up or down? Well, that comes by looking at A, the numbers in front. If A is positive, your parabola points up. If A is negative, your parabola points down. So once again, those are some really quick ways to help you visualize what your parabola should be looking like. So that should be everything we need to know about parabolas. For the rest of the videos, we're going to put all this information together and do some practice problems where we're actually finding vertex, axis of symmetry, x-intercepts, y-intercepts, and graphing the parabola. So that's what we'll do next.